When you're building APIs, it's really important to have a really quick and efficient way to manually test. You want to be able to send payloads, alter headers and authentication, and check what you're getting back. You want to do that reliably and quickly, be able to switch backwards and forwards between your code and your testing, and that tool to really get out of your way so that you can get on with your work. In this video, we're going to look at a couple of different ways you could do that and decide which we like best. Let's dive in. I have a really simple API here. I built it on a recent stream where we get random words. We got this hello message. We're able to get a word by ID, and we're able to get this HTML page. And I want to be able to test it. The first and most naive way is just to type the URL into my web browser. Be able to get back the response and be able to see what's there. Now, obviously that only works for GET requests. And if I want to be able to see things like the headers and the response, I have to go into the developer tools, and there's a lot of sort of poking around I have to do. So that's why we like a tool that's going to help us. So also web browsers are really good at GET requests, and they're less good at POST and PUT and the other verbs. The next level up, I would say, is the VS Code plugins system. So the one I use is called Thunder. Thunder allows you to create requests. So I'll do HTTP localhost words random. And I like this because it's pretty simple. It's built into my editor. I don't like that I can't Alt tab or Command tab to get between it and my code editor. So I feel like a bit of muscle memory in my mind. But you can do testing and scripting. You can see the response headers. You can set outgoing request headers and do all the things you'd expect to be able to do. You can split screen and have the code side by side so that you can alter the code, and maybe this should say with 2 exclamation marks, we could save it. Then when we go to hello, we can make sure that our response doesn't indeed say that, so it's ready to go. Now, having it built into our code editors, brilliant, fine. You might want a separate application to sort of separation of concerns. Maybe you don't want your code editor to be doing too much. There might be other reasons. And the big player in this ecosystem for a long time has been Postman. Postman does exactly what we've just seen. We can set headers and bodies and tests and scripts. We can do that to our request, and we can inspect our response really well. We can save, we can set up environment variables. We can have multiple different environments and collections of resources. We have different workspaces, and we have multiplayer team workspaces, and that's all lots of cool things that we can do. We can have this whole code snippet where you've got a request. Now you can copy it out and see, well, what would that look like as a fetch request? Or what would it look like in curl? And what would that look like if I was using Node.js's native request, and exploring all of those kind of bits as well. Now, I find Postman to be a little bit slow. I don't like having cloud account for it. I don't like that it's got so many options, most of which I never touch. And so for a long time I used Insomnia because it was really simple. But Insomnia have somehow seemed to want to have a feature parity with Postman. So they've added more and more things in, and it's felt more and more uncomfortable. You need a cloud account. It's got collections and all the rest of that. So I was looking for alternatives, and I put a shot out on Twitter, and I got a couple of answers I want to have a look at. So the first one I have on my list is Bruno. So Bruno reckons it's reinventing the API client, upsetting Postman, Insomnia, and other similar tools. It stores the collections directly in a folder in your file system using a plain text markup language called Brew to save information about API requests. And then you can version control those as well. So this is Bruno. When you create a collection, you create a folder locally where that's going to be stored. Then all of your requests with their bodies and various things are stored in that folder, which you could source control as well. There's no cloud account, which I quite like. I can send my request, get different words. I can set my query, my body, and it's quite a minimal set of things I can set in my body. I don't have to send everything here, which I quite like. Headers, auth. And again, not every auth, not every possible auth that is here, but enough of them to cover the sort of 19% that I might use. I can set variables, script, assertions, tests, and documents. That seems pretty cool. And I can see in my response here. I quite like this. And here's that request. It's a HTTP, it's a GET request. And I can see how that could be source controlled. That feels pretty powerful to me. So that's Bruno. It's got a dark mode and a light mode. I quite like it. Okay, that's the first one. What's next? So the next two that were recommended to me are both hosted. So they're not local applications. So that makes them slightly less useful for my use case. I want something that can trigger locally running APIs rather than things that are in the cloud. But this is FireCamp. They are working on a desktop application, but it's not ready yet. And if you want to test it, you have to build it locally to be able to explore that. And it runs as a web app. But again, this is simple, minimal, doesn't have everything as possible, but has lots of things. It's got, I quite like this. It's quite simple. But again, because it's in the cloud and it looks like it wants me to create a username, that always makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So that's FireCamp. Hopscotch. Similarly, this is a web app. Similarly, it looks like it wants me to have a cloud account. Does have a nice GraphQL editor. That's the first one I've seen so far. So that's nice. Rather than having to squeeze it into a REST request, it kind of knows how GraphQL works. And it has a WebSocket. So that's cool. So I think the others probably do as well, but it may be hidden under options I haven't seen yet. But that's cool. But again, for me, it has a cloud account, don't like, and it won't be able to test my local APIs because it's running in the browser. And lastly, we have Yak API should be delightful. It's a minimal app for REST and GraphQL, and WebSocket and gRPC is coming soon. Nice. Okay, this is in beta, and here it is. So we've got our it has folders and requests. So new requests, new folders. We can send everything that's in a folder, which is cool. Equally, the Bruno has a runner where you can run everything in a collection. So I think all of them have that kind of feature, but that's pretty cool. I can set parameters, headers, auth. Again, they've picked what they think are the two most common. I think they are. And they cover 90% of use cases. And for the body, again, they've picked the most common. With GraphQL, oh, nice. Their GraphQL does indeed help me it does query checking on the GraphQL query. So that's nice. Does Bruno have that as well? Let's check. Bruno, if this was a body, this is GraphQL, SparQL maybe? Are you going to test me out here? It looks like, what if I do something bonkers? Bonkers. Are you going to break? But I quite like that Yaak. When I've got this GraphQL, I can set variables down here. It's managing all those bits and pieces, which can be quite fiddly when you're testing and building GraphQL endpoints. So there we go. When you're building and testing APIs, you can test them in the browser for GET requests, but for any other method, you're going to need an API client or to write some code. Inside of VS Code, we've got Thunder. We also have standalone apps like Postman and Insomnia. They're quite heavy, so looking at lightening the load, we have Yaak, which I think is possibly the one I'm going to try going forward for the next couple of months, see how I get on with it. It's my favorite from what I've looked at. Bruno, which is my second favorite for sure. I really liked Bruno. And then the two that for me right now aren't suitable because they are run in the cloud and are Hopscotch and FireCamp, but they both seem pretty clean and solid and might be worth exploring for you as well. So what do you use to test your APIs? And are there any of the tools that I've looked at here that seem good to you? Give me a shout in the comments below, and I'll hope to see you around here soon. Thanks. Bye.